Welcome, everyone. I'm Megan Doherty, one of your hosts at the Sunflower Podcast. Welcome to this episode of the Sunflower Podcast, a podcast exploring children's palliative care from around the world. Today, I'm joined by Alex Daniels from the International Children's Palliative Care Network. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here.
Alex, I don't know if everyone knows you, so I would just love for you to tell me a bit about yourself. I know you have some really unique experiences that brought you to pediatric palliative care and the International Children's Palliative Care Network.
I'll try to be as brief as I can. I've lived a long life, so I've had lots of experiences. But I've been a nurse for many years and came to palliative care actually via grief and bereavement. I worked with a group of professionals who were trying to support the needs of children and families who had lost loved ones. It happened where I live in South Africa, post-HIV era, and there were many children and families and orphans and vulnerable children requiring support. In fact, teachers were saying to us that they were finding that children presented themselves in the classroom with behavioral issues. They couldn't concentrate. And when they probed a little bit, they found out that these children had actually lost a loved one. So the organization that I worked for helped support these caregivers. And some of them were teachers, they were nurses, they were social workers, helped them to firstly address their own grief and then help support children. So these caregivers provided a safe space. They started different support groups for children to help children grieve, to manage their grief. And I had a long experience doing this across South Africa in many different contexts. And I wanted to take my very practical experience to theory. And this was about 15, 16 years ago. And a colleague who I respect enormously said to me, "Why don't you practice palliative care?" And that's how I arrived. That's what led me on the journey to study palliative care and also to then work within the field. And this was in Cape Town.
Thank you, Alex. And then you went and worked in palliative care. Can you tell me about the initial work you did in the field of palliative care in Cape Town?
Yes. So in South Africa, palliative care is not a recognized specialty. And, although there's lots of work and we now have a national palliative care policy 15, 18 years ago, and sadly still today, the majority of children's palliative care was being provided by non-profit organizations. And I worked for one of these organizations, and we provided a consultative palliative care service to 3 or 4 hospitals within the Western Cape of South Africa. And that's how I started. We weren't welcome. It was very interesting. There were lots of misconceptions about what palliative care was, and many of our colleagues within the primary care teams were not too sure about this very small group, this very small team that came along to provide the service alongside the primary teams. So it wasn't easy within those early days, but that's where I started.
And then you came to an organization many of us know, the ICPCN, the International Children's Palliative Care Network. Tell me about joining there and what you now do in that work.
So the ICPCN is a global network, and our core work is to improve access to palliative care for more than 21 million children worldwide who need it. So the ICPCN, the global expert leadership and a wealth of educational resources, and we have a network of members in over 140 countries. ICPCN is actually in its 18th year, so we're working up to our 20th anniversary in 2025. And our vision is that all children living with life-limiting or life-threatening conditions and their families will have seamless access to palliative care in order to alleviate serious health-related suffering and enhance their quality of life. ICPCN works in 5 key areas, and we use the acronym CARES to help us describe that. So C is for communication, and we provide up-to-date information to our network, and you can access this through our website. We edit the Children's eHospice International newsletter, also have several new social media platforms, and our regular membership, they are able to access monthly newsletters. We also work in advocacy. A stands for advocacy. We aim to provide a global voice for children's palliative care. So there's a lot of advocacy for the rights of children to receive palliative care, regardless of where they live or what condition they have or how old they are, how much money they have, or their race or their gender or religion. So really access of palliative care for everyone. And linked to the advocacy is we have been, since conception, been developing a map that really outlines the provision of children's palliative care services, how this has developed over time. This was last updated in 2019, and we are currently dating it right now. So please look out for that, and we can be really excited to see progress that's happened in this area. And of course, a huge advocacy drive that some of you might know about is the Hats On campaign that happens on the second Friday in October, and this year is on the 13th of October. So we work in research. As you know, research is really important component of children's palliative care globally, and ICPCN actively works and drives and initiates research, and we collaborate on research, and we also very much involved in disseminating research. Education is my portfolio, and it's really important for us to make training children's palliative care accessible and affordable to all who need that. And this involves both face-to-face and online training. Our last area in that case is strategic development. So we support the strategic development of children's palliative care services worldwide through equipping, empowering, and supporting network members. An example of this can be seen within the supportive development of children's palliative care in places like Palestine, Kenya, the UAE, and Jakarta. And more about our work can be seen on our website.
Thank you, Alex. And that's certainly enough to keep a lot of people busy. And I know you're just focused on the education. I just want to go back to one thing you shared about there being 21 million children globally who need palliative care, who have those serious or life-threatening or life-limiting conditions. Can you tell me a little bit more about that need globally? Where are those children located? You mentioned about the mapping.
Yes. So ICPCN, in collaboration with UNICEF a few years ago, did some research and found that an estimate of 21 million children, and these are children aged between 0 and 19 years, will benefit from palliative care, and more than 8 million require specialist palliative care service. And most children, 98%, so quite a lot of children who need palliative care live in low and middle income countries. And sadly, the development of quality children's palliative care services has been neglected, and it often lags behind the palliative care development of adults. So you'll find that in some places there are services, palliative care services available for adults, but none for children, or very little provision and consideration made for children.
And wow, that's a big number, 98% being in low and middle income countries. It just really tells us a lot about there being such a big need. Let's talk about the e-learning of the ICPCN. I know you mentioned that you have a portfolio in education, and there's a fantastic e-learning website of the ICPCN. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? Describe it to us. I know it's been big and growing over the past few years.
So it's been around for about 12 and its 13th year now. And we have 11 short children's palliative care courses currently available in 14 languages. All the courses, as I said, are taster courses, although the course that we're currently working on is an enhanced and more specialist course. And they cover a range of topics from the introduction to children's palliative care, communication issues, pain assessment and management, and also end-of-life care, grief and bereavement. And of course, the latest children's palliative care course is on children's palliative care in humanitarian settings, which we've collaborated on. But I also need to say that all the courses are endorsed by the University of South Wales and are freely available on the ICPCN e-learning platform. So your listeners could go to www.elearnicpcn.org for more information.
Thank you, Alex. And I think that's a great thing to know. And, for anyone who's out there listening, these courses are available for any type of health professional. It doesn't have to be a certain type of health professional. They're out there for everybody to access freely. And they're available in a wide variety of languages. Can you tell me some of the languages that you have developed courses in? It's very impressive.
Yes, Portuguese, Spanish, the courses are available in French, in Czech, in Russian and Mandarin, in Farsi, in Serbian and Bengali, and also in Hindi. And I've probably missed one or two.
And you told me you don't speak all those languages, do you, Alex? How do you get the content developed? Who do you work with to get all the content in those different languages?
Yeah, that's a really important question. So collaboration is key. And although most of the courses have thus far been developed in English, that could change very soon. We've just recently had a conversation with a colleague who wants to develop a new course in French. And so we might well be translating a French course into English and into other languages. But so far, all the courses have been developed in English. And these are by subject experts across the world who approach ICPCN, or ICPCN have approached the subject experts and decided on a topic, and a course has subsequently, a curricula has been developed. But the translations, what's been happening is that we've collaborated with subject experts who work in different countries. So, for example, in Portugal, we have a small group of subject experts who collaborate, and we would send courses in English to these experts, and they would translate the courses, feed them back to us, and we would then get that inserted onto the e-learning site. So yes, you're correct. I don't speak those languages, but the courses are made possible through collaboration with subject experts who are volunteers across the world who have an interest in developing the courses for people within their region.
And it's amazing to think that we have these courses that are available, to health providers all over the world. You're reaching, you said, I think 160 countries. You have members in all those countries. What are some of the challenges of developing this program that can reach, people in every country of the world?
So I think that we reach a broad range of people. And I didn't say this to you, but, the people who undertake our courses, some of them are healthcare providers. Most of them are healthcare providers, but there are the people who also undertake the course. We sometimes have parents, lay people who have encountered children with serious health-related suffering and want to know more, also undertake the course. So it's a large global audience that we are catering for, and the needs are very different. What we also understand is that even though we are sharing core concepts or core theories or core concepts within children's palliative care, the resources in different parts of the world vary. And so in some parts of the world, for example, they might not have access to morphine or to medications or even paracetamol. So we need to be able to provide a good enough framework. The courses need to be able to do that can be adapted to various settings. So, that's one of the things. But we also understand that the culture of our audience varies, and we need to think about these things and be sensitive in terms of, we want to have courses that are engaging and interactive. So we use a lot of imagery, but we can't have people all looking the same in the courses. So we need to vary our imagery. We need to be able to think about how we portray children, how we portray mothers within the imagery we use. Those are some of the key considerations that we've needed to think about. But other important things are also internet, access to the internet. All our courses are available online and requires good enough broadband, someone to have access to internet challenges. People have challenges all the time. So they need to have a good internet in order to access our courses. Sometimes when you've got heavy content, so you've got lots of videos and lots of audio clips, it's that is quite difficult for someone who struggles with broadband. And so we need to think about those when we create the course and have a sort of balance of material that is easily accessible. So PDFs that can be downloaded and read offline, or materials that can be downloaded and accessed offline. Those are just some of the considerations to think about.
I can imagine you have to think about so many things when you're reaching such a global audience. And interesting that even parents or people just sort of who've encountered children with serious illness even take these courses. Initially, some of the courses had two components. They had, like you were saying, a theoretical component, and then people had to go for a clinical placement. But you've changed that a bit. Can you tell me how did that come about, that you switched to a just online format?
Yes. So for a couple of years, we were asking people to complete the theoretical component. They would receive a certificate of completion. And then those who were able to access a clinical site within their region were then asked to attend the clinical site for X amount of time. And there were certain criteria that they needed to fulfill. So they would go to the clinical site, and often these clinical sites were not credible. So if I had a friend at a clinical site, I'd get the friend to sign off on my criteria and send that back to ICPCN, and you then get a certificate of completion for the clinical component. So we found that this was not working. We stopped that program because we need to identify clinical sites globally, credible clinical sites with people who are experts within the field, who are able to manage and supervise those learners who have the theoretical knowledge and need the clinical support with some of the more practical components of palliative care. So for now, we're not offering that any longer. The mapping exercise that we're doing also looks at credible sites around the world, and we hope that we would be able to identify sufficient sites that we could reintroduce that program again.
Yeah, that sounds like a big challenge. We know that just doing the online course and just having that kind of theoretical component doesn't always translate it into practice, but getting those sites for people to practice is such a challenge.
Exactly.
One last question I have for you before we wrap up today's podcast is just about, COVID-19. I know it's fading a little bit from all of our memory, but how did this shape the education that the ICPCN offers?
As I've said before, our core education program was really providing the provision of face-to-face training, which was always funding dependent, and then the online training through the e-learning platform. And then came COVID-19, and this really required a shift from the face-to-face and virtual learning opportunities. There were just a range of opportunities that arose. We could then develop the children's palliative care expertise, as became a lot more readily accessible through forums like the Global Palliative Webinar Series. And this was a collaborative effort between WHPCA, IHPCA, Palchase, and ICPCN. And that was a series of webinars which was primarily focused on adults, but there were a couple of webinars that were directed towards children. That was very helpful. And then linked to the Children's Palliative Care International Case-Based Manual, which was a book that was edited by Julia Downing at ICPCN. We developed a series of webinars linked to every chapter in the book, and that happened last year, started in 2021, at the end of 2021, and ran through 2022. And sort of following up on the Children's Palliative Care International Case-Based Manual and its series, we've continued to have regular monthly webinars. They run every third Thursday of the month on a range of children's palliative care topics, where we usually get one or two speakers, and that's followed by a panel discussion. So a really helpful way for people to join. These webinars are also free. Really good way for people to join a global audience to discuss common issues in children's palliative care. So I'd encourage your listeners to have a look at the ICPCN website for more information. And if you miss the webinar on the third Thursday, you are also able to catch a recording on our YouTube channel.
That's great, Alex, and thank you so much for sharing. I feel like we've only really scraped the surface of what you know and what you do with the ICPCN, so we'll have to get you back on the podcast to share more of your experiences. But we'll wrap up there for today, and thank you everyone for listening. Once again, we will post a link for the ICPCN website and the e-learning website in the description of this podcast. And join us next time for our next Sunflower podcast, where we'll be hearing more about children's palliative care around the world.